everything down. Plus, on this Holy Saturday, Judge Jeanine takes us on a tour of the Museum of the Bible. But first, let's begin with Attorney General Jeff Sessions announcing this week that a federal prosecutor is now looking into alleged FISA abuses by the FBI. But some Republicans say it's still not enough. Joining me now with reaction from Florida, Congressman Ron DeSantis. Congressman, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday night to be with us. We very much appreciate it.
Good evening.
So what is your reaction to Attorney General Jeff Sessions saying this week that he's going to allow this U.S. Attorney of Utah, John Hubert, to look into this first and then take his recommendation about whether a special counsel is needed to look into FISA abuse under the Obama administration?
I think it's a step in the right direction from where he had been just a few weeks ago. Remember, a few weeks ago he said, I've appointed the Inspector General to look at it, who is a fine guy, but he doesn't have any prosecutorial authority. That means there would be no indictments, no grand jury, no anything. So the fact that you actually have a prosecutor who's outside the beltway, to me, is a step in the right direction. But here's the deal. There was a special prosecutor appointed to pursue President Trump when there was no evidence of a criminal violation involving Trump's campaign and Russia. In this instance, we have a lot of evidence that there were statutes that may have been violated, false statements made to Congress, false statements made to investigators, Andrew McCabe. You have potential obstructing a congressional investigation, disclosure of classified information. So you have all those things, and clearly the Justice Department has a conflict because they can't investigate themselves. So to me, it seems the case for a special counsel in this instance is much stronger than it was when Rosenstein appointed Robert Mueller.
Yeah, and Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz is very well respected by Republicans and Democrats for the work that he does. But I want to play you some sound from your colleague, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Gutlatt, in his response to the Attorney General saying we're not quite there with the new special counsel.
We really think this should be an investigation outside of the Department of Justice altogether, is why we continue to call for a special counsel.
Congressman, a lot of people don't exactly know that, yes, the Inspector General has a lot of power to unveil a lot of the wrongdoing, but he only can really recommend disciplinary action. He can't actually prosecute the crimes that may or may not have been committed. So explain to the viewers about the jurisdiction that the Inspector General actually has and why the DOJ might not be able to investigate themselves.
Well, the Inspector General is not a prosecutor. So if you identify a criminal violation, he doesn't go to a grand jury and get an indictment. Indeed, he can't go to a grand jury and subpoena evidence. He can't even bring witnesses in who are not already inside the Justice Department or FBI to question them. So it has a role, and I think this Inspector General is well respected, but it's more of a bureaucratic function to try to see what the department can do better. When you have evidence of wrongdoing, that calls for somebody that has prosecutorial authority. I mean, just think of the news with Andrew McCabe lying 4 times to other agents or in the Inspector General. Now, Mueller has gone after Michael Flynn for making one supposed false statement. Papadopoulos, one supposed false statement. Here you have 4. So the average American, if they lie to the FBI, they get indicted. But the deputy director, if he lies 4 times, then he just goes to the Inspector General and that's it. So we have to have equal justice that applies not just to the average American, but also to those people in those high levels of authority.
Well, speaking of equal justice for all Americans, have you seen the Inspector General report that the Inspector General has been working on, looking into how the FBI handled, including former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, how they handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation? Have you seen that? What kind of insight can you give us?
We have not seen the actual report. There's little bits that we hear about, but this has been going on for, I think, going on 15 months now, Katie, and I think that this thing needs to be brought in for a landing. I think there's going to be a lot of problems that are uncovered. As we know, this investigation into Hillary was badly mishandled from the start, so I think it's important to put that out there because there have been a lot of guys like me saying, why aren't more heads rolling in the FBI for some of the misconduct that we've seen? And I think part of the reason is people like Sessions have been waiting, and Christopher Wray have been waiting for this IG report. So the quicker we get that, I think the quicker you'll see more accountability in both agencies.
I think that's the key question, because people see these reports come out. They see Congress working to try to bring some kind of accountability. What do you think can be done when we do get this report from Congress's side to actually hold people accountable? The frustration is we see all this information all the time, and yet people keep getting away with it.
Exactly. Well, I think there needs to be two tracks. One, the IG report can provide the basis to terminate people like Peter Strzok, the anti-Trump biased FBI agent, in his text messaging. But the prosecutor, and hopefully that will evolve into a special counsel, that individual can address criminal violations. And so hopefully some of these people who misbehave will immediately be terminated and be out of the government. But to me, that's not the end of it. You need the special counsel to follow through for any criminal liability that is uncovered.
Congressman, switching gears real quickly before I let you go, President Trump gave a speech last week about infrastructure. He's going to need Congress to push through a $1.5 trillion plan is what he's asking for. What is your view from Capitol Hill about how that's going to get done and whether it's going to get done before the midterms?
The most important thing he's identified is making these projects go on time, cutting all the bureaucracies, the red tape, so that if a project is authorized, it could actually be done on time and hopefully ahead of schedule. That's not the norm now. So the dollar signs, to me, I think that's going to be debated. But if he's really streamlining a way forward for infrastructure, even the existing dollars we have now will actually be put to good use. And I think you'd see a big time improvement.
All right, well, we'll wait to see how that fight plays out on the Hill. Congressman Ron DeSantis, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And joining me now with more on all of this, senior advisor for the Trump 2020 campaign, Katrina Pearson, and former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor, David Tafuri, correct? Thank you both so much for coming on tonight. Katrina, I want to start with you and your reaction to Attorney General Jeff Sessions kind of punting this off to a U.S. attorney in Utah, saying this guy is removed from the Justice Department, maybe because he's in a faraway state. What is your reaction to that?
Well, you know, Katie, I have to sort of echo Congressman DeSantis in saying that, yeah, it makes sense to find somebody outside of D.C. to investigate. But my issue really is about the standard here. Where was that standard when the special counsel was appointed to go after the president and his family? This is a complete and absurd atrocity. Jeff Sessions should have appointed a special counsel to investigate this because we've already seen what has happened under the Obama administration. Jeff Sessions himself has reconciled with American citizens who were targeted by Obama's IRS. What exactly is he trying to confirm? Is he just waiting on some sort of, maybe, I don't know, a confession? It just doesn't make any sense, and this is going to take a lot more time. And meanwhile, Robert Mueller is running all over the place. They won't even narrow his scope here. And so here we are today, knowing that neither you or I or any of the viewers of tonight's program could ever get away with deleting 30,000 emails after receiving a subpoena and still be walking around.
David, my question for you, well, you, David, agree that this should be investigated for another reason. However, doesn't the FBI have a credibility problem, not just with Republicans, but with the country as a whole? And wouldn't a special prosecutor for this case kind of clean some of that up?
Well, what I think your audience would want is for us to follow the rule of law, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, to make sure that these investigations go forward properly and that there are impartial decision makers who are in charge of these investigations. Now, Katrina is massively confused about the standard. The standard for special counsel is if there's a conflict of interest or if there are extraordinary circumstances. Neither of those are in place here. So Sessions made the right choice.
But were they in place for the other special counsel with Mueller? That's the question. Is there a double standard here? It sure looks like it.
And that's a great question, because what happened with Mueller is very different. The reason we have a special counsel Mueller is because Trump fired Comey. When he fired Comey, that showed there was a conflict of interest. In fact, Trump said a week later on NBC he fired Comey because of the Russia.
David, do you believe that Hillary Clinton wouldn't have actually fired James Comey?
Let me finish. The reason that we know that there was a conflict of interest is because Trump went on NBC and he said, I fired Comey because of the Russia investigation. That's a true conflict of interest. That's why we ended up with a special counsel. In the case of this investigation that Sessions decided not to have a special counsel, there's no such concern. In fact, there's a U.S. attorney in Utah who's going to follow the rules, follow the law, and investigate this. He doesn't have a conflict of interest. That's why these two issues are distinct.
Well, Katrina, he said you were confused. You want to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, of course, Katie. I mean, the problem is about evidence. The standard is about evidence from General Sessions' mouth himself. There is zero evidence of Russia collusion. However, when you take Loretta Lynch sitting on the tarmac with Bill Clinton, you have hundreds of Americans, law-abiding citizens, that have been spied on through unmasking by the Obama administration, not to mention Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation's accounts receivable, and these new texts that show between Strzok and Page, quote, the White House is leading on this. Really? Evidence. Yeah. The House Intelligence Committee has already uncovered FISA abuse, of which Rod Rosenstein's signature is on that form. There is your conflict with appointing this Mueller investigation. It is a farce and a witch hunt, exactly like the president has stated. Well,
and I think that everyday Americans outside of the D.C. Beltway are concerned about this happening to them and the abuse at the FBI and the FISA court. It's not just about high-profile politicians running for president. It's about all Americans. But I want to switch gears real quickly to President Trump's infrastructure speech last week. Katrina, you're working on his 2020 campaign. He talked in front of 400 union members in Ohio. Should that concern Democrats when they're trying to get back those districts and counties that President Trump turned from blue to red?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we'll let the Democrats still run on taking away their Americans' bonuses and this fake Russia collusion. Meanwhile, the president's making America great again. This is an infrastructure package that will be bipartisan. It is focused on putting America's first and rebuilding our own communities and expanding financing for a lot of these projects with public-private partnerships in place that I would hope would make states more accountable for where their money is going so they could better suit their citizens as well. So I think it's going to be really exciting over the summer as this plays out.
David, infrastructure is usually a Democratic issue. Is this something that Trump's going to be able to work with Democrats on, or are they going to take it and run even in an election year?
Well, it should be a bipartisan issue. I'm from Ohio. We're really glad that the president went to Ohio. We always want to highlight our state. The president gave a speech there. He was supposed to talk about infrastructure, but he pretty much just talked about himself, his favorite subject. So for the people who showed up for this speech, the pro-Trump people, they were probably happy to hear that speech. But if you were looking for details about the infrastructure program and how it's going to be implemented, they were not in that speech. I would love to hear those, and I'd like to see Democrats and Republicans support it.
Well, you might want to go back through because he did give 4 distinct points on how he wants to implement it. But for another time, Katrina Pearson, David Tafuri, thank you so much for being here.
Happy Easter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Jeanine gives us a tour of the Bible Museum on this Holy Saturday night. And next, Kim Jong-un ready to sit down with South Korea's president. What does it mean and what's the next move for President Trump? Dr. Sebastian Gorka is here live, and we'll talk about that and much more in just a moment. Stay with us as Justice rolls on.
Just this week, we secured a wonderful deal with South Korea. We were in a deal that was a horror show. It was going to produce 200,000 jobs. And it did, for them. That was a Hillary Clinton special, I hate to say it. This will produce 200,000 jobs. She was right, but it was for them. It wasn't for us. So we've redone it.
Welcome back to Justice Live from the nation's capital. That was President Trump giving a strong speech this week with a major focus on North and South Korea. Joining me now with reaction, former Deputy Assistant to the President, Fox News contributor, and author of Defeating Jihad, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Thank you so much for coming in to talk about these important topics.
Sure.
We'll start with Russia with the news this week. 60 diplomats expelled from the United States in conjunction with other countries around the world doing the same. What is your reaction to that?
I'm very happy. We're coming together as an alliance, as a group of Western nations, to take the threat from Russia seriously. It's not of the strategic size of the Soviet Union, but in some ways it can be more dangerous. According to some estimates, there are more Russian intelligence officers actively working in the West than there were at the height of the Cold War, and we see that they're doing nefarious activities, whether it's destabilizing countries like the Ukraine or the so-called near abroad of Russia, or whether it's potentially assassinating assassinating people on the streets of the UK, we have to respond.
Well, one of the things that the questions that come up is administration officials have been saying, look, these diplomats in the United States aren't actually Russian diplomats. They're just spies under a diplomatic flag, so to speak.
Right.
So the question is, how is it that they've been operating as spies, as an intelligence network in the United States for so long? And it took this issue in the UK with the Russians poisoning a former spy who was a British citizen to get everyone to react this way.
Well, look, there's an old tradition here. Every nation has diplomats they deploy to the territory of another country in their embassy. They can be working economics, politics, you name it. They can be, issuing visas. But every nation deploys intelligence professionals to their embassies. Now, in some cases, they're declared. You have a chief of station, and if it's a friendly nation, they'll know who the chief of station is, for example, from the CIA. But in the case of Russia, they pack their embassies full of, advisors, political analysts, economists who have nothing to do with those jobs, but they're actually intelligence collectors. They are SVR, they're members of the KGB's new organization, and they fill them full of hundreds of operatives.
Well, the United States flag in St. Petersburg today came down off the U.S. consulate there. Russia has responded in what they say is a reconciliatory way in terms of reciprocity. But it seems to me that could actually be a distraction. Obviously, the expelling of diplomats here makes a statement, but should we be more worried about real attacks that Russia could be launching in the cyber war? For example, the Russians, we found out a couple weeks ago, they actually infiltrated our energy sector, parts of the energy grid in America. So, this is important, obviously, an important show of force, but should we be also paying attention to other damaging aspects of how Russia will retaliate?
We expected the tit for tat. We've seen this during the Cold War. This is what they do. But yes, absolutely, whether it's in the cyber domain or I'm far more concerned in terms of information warfare, psychological operations. If you look at the fact that it was Russian propaganda that went into the Steele dossier that Hillary Clinton paid for that was used to acquire that illegal FISA warrant, well, guess what? That's a successful Russian information operation. That's the kind of thing we have to respond to as well.
Right. I want to get to, related to Russia, the president said this week that he wants to take the United States out of Syria soon. Given that Russia has a lot of influence there, what is your reaction to that? And then I want to get to North Korea.
Look, I work for the president. The president is not an adventurist. The fact that he is a conservative, he's the GOP president, he won the election as a GOP candidate, doesn't mean he's a neoconservative. He sees the invasion of other people's countries, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, as fundamentally un-American. We were born as a nation in rebellion to colonialism. He doesn't like it. So nobody should be surprised that he wants our troops out of Syria, because he wants to build the wall. He wants to do things back home. Yeah,
Master Sergeant Jonathan Dunbar was killed this week in Syria, so that certainly gives us a reality check about what we're doing there. North Korea, the South Korean president and the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un may be meeting, scheduled to have some talks. What should we expect from that, and what should we expect from President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un in the future? April 1st is tomorrow. May's not too far away. That's exactly when they said they wanted to have the meeting. So where are we on all of that?
April 1st could be very apposite. Remember, this is a dictatorship. This is more Stalinist than even the height of Stalin's Soviet Union. This is a regime that starves its own people. So what do dictatorships do? They lie. Whether it's Hitler in Munich in 1938, whether it's the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis, let's remember what Reagan said: trust but verify. This is the first time in 65 years a North Korean head of state wants to meet an American president. That's massive already, but let's not expect it to go completely smoothly.
Right. I think that's good advice. Well, we are out of time, but Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thank you so much for coming in tonight. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And still ahead tonight, Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA joins the political panel. And next, a special treat for you this Easter Eve. Judge Jeanine takes you inside the beautiful Museum of the Bible in our nation's capital. Your exclusive look is next. Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Marianne Rafferty. More than 100 protesters gathering in Sacramento again today. They're rallying over the police shooting of Stephon Clark 2 weeks ago. Among the protesters, his fiancée and young children. Clark was unarmed when he was shot. Police say they mistook his cell phone for a gun. Autopsy results released yesterday found that he was shot 8 times and 6 of the shots were in his back.
And Pope Francis delivering his Easter Vigil message today. He urged people to not be silent in the face of injustices, as he said Jesus' disciples were during the crucifixion. He also baptized 8 people, one of them a Nigerian beggar named John Oga. Oga became a hero in Italy for disarming a robber while standing outside a market begging for spare change. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Well, the Museum of the Bible is a powerful and spiritual place to visit in Washington, D.C. that focuses on the history, narrative, and impact of the Bible. So what better time to take a look back at Judge Jeanine's exclusive interview with Hobby Lobby CEO and Chairman of the Board for the Museum of the Bible, Steve Green, and their tour of the museum.
Now, you are one of the world's largest retailers, privately owned retailers, and one of the most successful businessmen in the country. And yet you've undertaken this mammoth project, 430,000 square feet, the Museum of the Bible here in Washington, D.C. There is nothing like it anywhere in the world. Why?
I grew up in a home that had a love for God's Word. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents took us to church and raised our family according to the Bible. And in our business, if you look at the first statement of purpose in our business, it says to operate our business according to biblical principles. And it has served us well. And I am blessed to be born in a country that our founders built from principles they found in this book. So I have been blessed personally by this book in multiple ways. And we just want to encourage others to consider this book themselves. We want to inspire them to engage with it and consider the principles this book teaches for their own life.
You know, they say that 90% of American homes have within them a Bible. And yet it seems that this generation, unlike previous generations, has never been more distanced from the Bible. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think you could argue we're probably more ignorant of this book than we have ever been as a nation. And I believe primarily because we don't teach it in our schools as we once did. It was regularly taught in our schools, so people grew up knowing it. Our founders, it was common. They would speak from the Bible and they wouldn't have to give chapter and verse because everybody knew what they were talking about. Today, you make a quote from the Bible and many have no idea what you're talking about or where the source is. Even common phrases within our vernacular come from the Bible that many people would have no idea that that's where it comes from.
In this museum, you have created technology to tell this story. Technology, I understand, that didn't exist. You created it and patented it. Tell us about that.
There is new technology. One specific example is there is a digital docent. It's a tablet, smaller than maybe an iPad, a little larger than an iPhone, where a visitor can customize it, tell it how long they want to be in the museum, what their interest is, and then it will direct them through the museum using indoor guidance that knows where they're at within inches. This is some of the new technology that we have patented.
Bronze doors downstairs, powerful, impactful, but more than that, how much do they weigh?
16 tons collectively. You don't want them falling over on you, that's for sure.
How do you deliver 16 tons of doors?
One piece at a time.
Museum of the Bible, the Capitol, Supreme Court, Library of Congress. It's amazing how much of our American history reflects quotes from the Bible.
So this is the Museum of the Bible here, and we can show you how far. We're just a few blocks from the United States Capitol.
And so what is written in the United States Capitol?
Well,
it's
there's
quoted
a lot
from
of
the
things.
Bible.
What we do is some of the paintings right there in the rotunda, the Mayflowers are coming over. There is a Bible that they're showing, a Geneva Bible that's in the painting that we'll show. This is where we have scripture around us all day long. In many cases we don't even know it. It's just phrases from our language that are used.
Here you have Victoria Beckham with a tattoo that literally quotes the Song of Solomon. You know, that the Bible is so relevant to so many people in so many ways that we don't even recognize. One of the things that you have done that also speaks to how religion plays such an important part of your life is, as that not-for-profit business owner of Hobby Lobby, you took the Obama administration to the United States Supreme Court. You fought for religious freedom. You funded the case. Where the Obama administration made a mandate that religion be damned, and you would have to pay for abortifacts for any employee in your employ. And you felt that that was a violation of your religious freedom. Number one, why? How hard was it? And what did it feel like when you won?
If life begins at conception, as our family believes, then to take part of an abortive drug or process, we view that as taking life. And that is something that violates our religious beliefs. And there are many in this country. There are many that believe the same way that we do. That taking life is obviously, in our mind, wrong. And so for the government to come in and tell us that we had to freely provide to our employees products that could take life, that violated our conscience, and we felt like we had no option but to take and challenge the government on the mandate that they required us to take part of that. And so we met as a family, and the decision was unanimous that we really felt like we had no option but to challenge the government that we love on the mandate that they had put on our business.
And when you won?
We won. It was an exciting day. I think that there was, for many of us, we somewhat felt like we would have a win, but there's no guarantee. There was a certain comfort that we had that we knew we were doing the right thing. And we were at Oxford, my wife and I. The rest of the family was at the corporate office at our offices in Oklahoma City, and we were Skyping in, and it was just a thrilling day to know that the foundational principle that this nation was built upon, our religious freedoms, were upheld. And just the pride of our country is, I remember some of the feelings that I had. This section is called Bible Now, showing how people are engaging with it right now. Another world map showing people that are opening up the app to engage with the Bible. So the skeptic comes in here thinking that nobody's reading this book anymore. No, there are people all over the world right now engaging with this book, and there is no book that can compare to that.
And what do you say to American families about coming here?
Well, our purpose is we want to invite all people to engage with this book. So this is a museum for all people. This book has spoken into people from all different walks of life and has impacted lives from all different walks. And so this is a place for people to come in and learn.
Well, Stephen Green, you know, on behalf of so many of us, you and Mrs. Green, your wife Jackie, have done an unbelievable job here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Pretty amazing. Looking forward to going myself. President Trump's latest tweets target Amazon. Plus, we will see a border wall, right? When will that happen? Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA and Hill contributor Wendy Osefo are on board next to debate the news of the day. Justice rolls on in just a moment. Welcome back to Justice. My panel is here and ready to battle it out. On one side of your screen, founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, and on the other, political commentator and contributor to The Hill, Wendy Osefo. Thank you both for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Katie.
So, Charlie, we're going to start with you first. Last week, President Trump gave a speech to a rowdy crowd of 400 union workers talking about building the wall, he said. What is your take on that?
We absolutely need to build the wall. Look, first and foremost, the wall will be a symbol of our sovereignty, which we have been losing over the last couple decades. Not to mention, you look at the incalculable cost of illegal immigration upon this country. You look at 98% of all heroin in America comes across the southern border. Over 10,000 kids are illegally human trafficked across the southern border every year. And an independent study showed that in Arizona, an illegal immigrant is twice as likely to commit a crime over a natural-born U.S. citizen. And finally, the financial cost upon the U.S. taxpayer is $115 billion a year. So even if the wall costs $10 billion or $15 billion, which I don't think it should cost that much, it is a small price to pay for how illegal immigration has been ruining this country over the last couple decades.
Well, look, I've always said that open borders are inhumane borders, but Wendy, the Border Patrol actually gave an update this week about the progress of this wall, and they're choosing the prototypes that they're going to use. They're ready to go with 100 miles of fence and replacing that that, building the wall in places that needs to be taken back and refurbished. And the people in charge at Border Patrol have said, this isn't us talking, this isn't politicians, this is guys on the ground saying, in these specific areas, we absolutely need these kinds of barriers, the wall, to keep out human traffickers and drug cartels, as Charlie said, from hurting Americans here at home. What's your response?
Well, at the end of the day, if we want to keep our country safe, that's something we could definitely do. But Charlie makes some points, but what it is really just political rhetoric and a political placebo. Why I say that is if we look at the wall, out of the 697 miles that can be fenced, 654 are already fenced. And then if we also look at it, the people who are here in this country legally, we are looking at individuals who have lapse in visas. They're not necessarily all criminals. And we could look at factcheck.org or alliance.com. These are nonpartisan social networks which state this. So let's not sit here and try to criminalize all illegal immigrants and say that they're hurting our country when that's not the case.
Charlie, no one's doing that, right? No one said that.
No, we have 40,000 illegal immigrants in our federal prison system. So we're not trying to criminalize an entire group of people. We're just talking about
more
facts
Americans
right here.
in our federal prison.
40,000 illegal immigrants in our federal prison. Let me finish. Hold on. Let me finish. And like I said, an illegal immigrant is twice as likely to commit a crime over a natural U.S. citizen. I'll say this idea like, oh, it's improbable, it's impractical. I don't accept that for a minute. We're Americans. We get big things done. And if we had a zero tolerance policy about illegal immigration in this country, we would execute that. We have allowed illegal immigrants to undercut our country for far too long financially and culturally, and it's destabilizing us all across America. And look, I don't think we should stand for it anymore. Not to mention, this is a key campaign promise that the president ran on that he needs to fulfill, and it's going to restore our sovereignty, which I think is critically important.
Wendy? Yeah, Charlie, that's intellectually dishonest. For you to sit here and state the figures of illegal immigrants who are in the federal prison when we know we have more American citizens in the federal prison system.
Well, they are entitled to live here.
American citizens in America.
But wait. So hold on here. You cut me off, but I can't cut you off. No, let's state the facts. The facts are it's a campaign promise, but it's a flawed campaign promise. And furthermore, the president wants to build this wall by going into defense spending, which is not good. We can't take away money from our military just to keep a campaign promise. That's not what we're doing here. We should keep our country safe. Yes, we should. But again, for you to sit here and make it seem as though illegal immigrants are some type of criminals or to criminalize them, that's not what we're going to do, because that is intellectually dishonest.
Well, first of all, it's not intellectually dishonest because according to the federal code, it is illegal to enter the country without permission. So entering the country, first of all, well, you just said that they're not operating with illegality, and absolutely they are. So let's actually be intellectually honest about the fact that if you're in the country illegally, you have already broken the law. And as we've seen across the country, Charlie, as the president has pointed out repeatedly, we have states like California, cities across the country, not just protecting illegal immigrants and allowing them to evade law enforcement, but protecting the worst of the worst, child rapists, domestic abusers, violent people who have a record with handguns in this country. What do you have to say to that when we're being told that we are intellectually dishonest about who these people really are?
Well, look, and there is no response to any of these numbers or figures. Like, for example, I'm going to repeat myself, 98% of all the heroin and fentanyl in this country comes across the southern border. The opioid epidemic is destroying middle America, and if we built the wall and secured our borders, we could put a huge stop to that. Not to mention MS-13, which has wreaked havoc on our urban areas.
There we go.
Their number one conduit of bringing weapons and criminals into this country is the southern border. There is no response to that. Of course there's more Americans in federal prison. There's more Americans than there are illegal immigrants. But if you look at statistically, they're twice more likely to commit a crime than natural-born Americans are. Not to mention, they committed a crime by coming here in the first place. Citizenship is not a right. You don't just get to be a citizen because you came across the border. That's not something just handed out upon crossing the Rio Grande. And finally, Katie, you bring up a great point. We have to defund these sanctuary cities and stop giving preference to illegal immigrants in Sacramento and Los Angeles just because they want to be used as political pawns for the Democrat Party.
Wendy, last word to you.
No, you know, at the end of the day, what I think is really important here is that we need to secure our borders. We need to make sure that Americans are safe. But what we need to do is we need to look within our country and see how we can enhance our country, not just by saying we're going to preclude a certain group of people or a certain group of population from, you know, what's going on here in America. Like, that's not the way in which we should move forward.
I think people are fine with getting criminal aliens out of the population
of America. They're not all criminal aliens, and that's exactly what I'm saying, Katie.
We are out of time today. Charlie Kirk, Wendy SFO, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie.
So what can the United States do to fight the persecution of Christians around the world? Judge Jeanine sits down with Father Andre Mahana next to discuss that and how we can help on this Easter weekend. Back in a moment. Well, earlier this week, Judge Jeanine sat down in advance of Easter with Father Andre Mahana to talk about Christian persecution around the globe and how we can help.
Father Andre Mahana, thanks so much for being with us. You know, you are the national president of the Association of the Clergy, which was created by the Vatican. You have been educated and you've studied the priesthood in France, in Rome, in Lebanon, the country where you're from, my ethnic background as well. But I'm sure that you've seen, as I've seen, in a 10-year period between 2005 and 2015, more than 1 million Christians slaughtered because they are Christians in the Middle East and Africa. What is happening?
What's happening is a global genocide against Christianity, which is today is the world's largest persecuted religion in the world, the judge.
Why? But why? Why is it happening? Who's allowing it to happen?
Well, we have 4 reasons for this to happen in the world. First of all, it's been happening for 200 years in a great silence in the world, one of which I think the West secularism is one main reason after the French Revolution, and I think this is a historical reason behind this. And after that, you had the Turkish Empire, First World War, basically, when you had 1.5 million Armenians, you had the genocide against the Syriac people inside Turkey and Lebanon and Syria, in other areas in the Middle East. Then you had the wave of the Arab states beginning in their creation after Sykes-Picot. The world was in so much transformation and changes. Then you had Europe, United States, South Asia, Far Asia, between the 2 great wars in the 20th century. But I think the main reason for this silence has to do with secularism, radical Islam in the world, unfortunately, and the trend in the West that they think persecuting Christians is a simple reason because of a religious ignorance.
But
because
why isn't
unless
the United States getting involved? Isn't the United States supposed to be, you know, the country that protects people and liberties, and, you know, we're welcoming all these refugees. What about Christian refugees? Are they coming into this country equally?
They're not coming. They're not allowed to come into the country, at least under the former administration.
Obama.
We see hope with the new administration. Yes, ma'am. We see hope with the new administration, with our president. And this is why I was inclined when I was doing prayers in his rally that he understood that message and he wanted to make sure America becomes one of the promoters and protectors for Christians in the world. I am praying that he will continue and achieving his promises in this regard. In my short and few meetings, brief meetings with the president and part of his teams and many religious leaders in the U.S., that's what I do with Our Lady of Fatima statue, the one I told you about. I blessed the president with it, and I blessed also, I prayed with Pope Francis with that same statue. Spiritual diplomacy should be added as one of the platforms in the 21st century to make America a leader in the world to maintain the justice.
Father, with all due respect, I don't know what spiritual diplomacy means. We pray for them to stop? At some point, don't we?
I tell you.
Yes.
I tell you what spiritual diplomacy means. It means simply say the truth. Break the silence about the persecution against Christians. Make sure the world know that Christianity is light in this world and it must be kept. And don't let oil, don't let money, don't let any other values in humanity or interest or political intrigues challenge you. That's what I call spiritual diplomacy. It's okay for a president to stand and say, I am a believer, I am a Christian, I am a pro-life, I want to stop abortion, I want to stop physician-assisted suicide, I want to stop the murder of Christians in the world. I want to allow that faith to flourish because it is important for it to flourish as the only faith that calls for the love of the enemy.
Is the Pope doing enough?
Is the Pope doing enough? The Pope, my information says, is being informed. Definitely he's accompanying and he's following up. Doing enough? I think he can do more. To be honest with you, the Pope can do more on the platform of protecting Christians in the world and in the Middle East. But I do believe he is very sincere at heart to try to understand and to try to do
he's the leader of the flock.
Enough.
He should be at the head of the spear. And finally, because we're running out of time, Father, what would you like my viewers to do? Besides the spiritual diplomacy, speaking up, what can they do for Christians in the Middle East?
I want him to go tell, save the persecuted Christians in the world. Go check St. Rafka, Mission of Hope and Mercy.org.